level set here. Welcome into my channel. This is a channel where I discuss in-home elderly care, and I use the case study of my grandmother, Ruth C. Kenton. Okay, and the C is important. As she would always say, Ruth Kenton, it's Ruth C. Kenton, and the C is important. Okay, Grandma. You will not get any disagreement from me on that. Ruth C. Kenton, yes. And if you've been watching any of these videos, I have been going through a series of items where we talk about if you are going to do in-home elderly care for a loved one. Could be anybody, don't have to be elderly, but most likely when you're looking at doing this kind of work, this kind of in-home care, it is for someone that is elderly. It is for a loved one. That's the way that my experience was. That's what I think you're mostly going to be confronted with. All right, and we've been talking about going through what you're looking at in that whole process. And it can be a lot. Actually, it is a lot. It's not even that it can be, it just is, right? So if you've seen any of these videos, if you've gone through any of them, you know some of the things that I have previously been discussing, talking about, number one, if you're even the proper candidate to do it, okay, and then what you kind of want to vet out before you do, and then if you are the candidate, you know, looking at, and that's where we've been presently in the series, is looking at each week taking an item and kind of breaking it down and looking at what some of the possible scenarios are for that particular situation or whatever the item is that at play that we're talking about. So for today's video, you know, I usually have a PowerPoint and we're going over slides and, you know, kind of this, that, and the third. I'm going to do one off slides tonight. So this is one off slides, and we're going to talk about having your patients tested, or testing your patients, or some of the things that you might run into that will test your patients in this process. And I tell you, your patients will absolutely be tested. It's absolutely on the list of items. So if you're someone that does not have a lot of patience, and I think I am kind of someone that doesn't have a lot of patience, it's easy for me to get frustrated in traffic and, you know, just the commonalities of life. But anyways, with that being said, with Ruth, some things I was patient in, some things I wasn't patient in. But the reality is if you are patient or not, the situation is just going to be what it is, and you are going to have to make a choice on whether or not you're going to rise to that occasion, or if you're going to, you know, lose your temper and freak out, flip out, which I probably did a couple of times. It's just the nature of the beast. So some of the ways that my patience was tested as I was caring for Ruth. Number one, the biggest one, as I'm thinking about this, that comes to my mind is Ruth had trouble hearing and she had trouble seeing. And at the end, she was completely blind and she almost was completely deaf. So why do I say that? Well, from the hearing standpoint, which if I have to pick one of the two, the hearing one would be the one that sticks out as something that would test my patience on. So what does that mean? Well, it means, number one, anything that you say to the customer, a customer dealing with this type of condition, you have to be loud and up close, and you have to repeat it over and over and over again, and you have to talk slow, and then even then it might not, what you're trying to say doesn't get communicated. Now you have to rephrase and regroup what you're saying, choose different words, figure out another way to communicate your point. And then on top of that, she couldn't see, so it's not like, you know, the expression of a picture being worth 1,000 words. Well, if you don't have a picture because she can't see, And then it doesn't matter how many words you use because she can't hear. Well, good grief, how do you communicate? You know, and it was frustrating. Basically, if you were, it wasn't always like this. If you heard me talk about this in any of the videos, her conditions progressively got worse over the years. So it wasn't like this right away. But by the end, I, you know, talking about these things, it's hard to forget that or it's hard to remember sometimes that it wasn't always that way. You always want to go to the most extreme of the examples. So starting there and kind of working my way back, I'll say by the end, if you were not right at her ear, okay, and speaking kind of like in the cadence I'm using right now, speaking very loud and direct and using small, digestible words, it wasn't going to happen, okay? And she had hearing aids. Look, she always wore hearing aids. This is even before her conditions worsened. She's probably been wearing hearing aids for 15 years, whatever it might be. And then about 6 months before her passing, those were just standard hearing aids. Little speaker right here, and then the thing that goes over the ear and is the microphone set up. We change out the batteries every couple of days. She wore those for 10, 15 years, something like that, or some version of it. And then about 6 months before she died, she got this new set of hearing aids. And these were hearing aids that went in her ear, but it had a wider plastic piece. So it actually closed off the surrounding part of her ear and insulated the sound in. So when we spoke, there was nothing going into that ear other than what was, coming out of the speaker. And we could see a significant improvement in her hearing, like instantly. And frankly, as we were discussing it, me and the other caretakers, we wish we'd have done it for a long time ago. Hindsight's 2020, but we just were working with the information that we had at the time and the level of understanding that we had at the time. So that's something that I would absolutely say about that if you're experiencing something and you see a way to improve it, and like, hey, look, man, these hearing aids, shoot, have you priced them? Most likely, I don't know who you are, but most likely you're not going to find the money to pay for these things between the couch cushions, okay? The old set she had, and one of the reasons she kept that old set so long because I think it was about $5,000 for the set, and then these new ones were somewhere in the same amount, and maybe insurance covered some of it. I don't know. I don't really think that it did, or it was like a smaller amount or whatever. But you're coming out of pocket on these things, okay? And again, if you priced any of them, and so she, her sensation, her feeling was that she had bought like a used car, that she's got to keep in her ear, or spent the same amount of money on it, right? And she wanted to get the maximum value out of it, and she did. And then with that old set of hearing aids, it got to the point where she, it's not that they weren't effective, they're just not as effective as they could be, and the doctor finally suggested getting a new set, and she did, and we could see a tremendous difference in her hearing. But even then, even with the new ones, you would still have to be up close on her and speak in a very firm, what am I trying to say, like spaced out, space your words out style of speaking, okay? And so I say that because it would drive us crazy, because you would be on the other side of the room, and here's Ruth, and thankfully her mind never left her. It was just these different elements of her body that began to fail. But you would be on the other side of the room, and she would know that you're on the other side of the room, and she would ask you a question, and you would answer, huh? What? Huh? And you would think to yourself, that I'm on the other side of the room. Like, why don't you wait until I come back over there and then ask me your question? Because either A, I've got to yell it, which yelling the answer, let me tell you, yelling the answer for somebody that has extreme hearing loss, 50-50 at best. At best. Hey, and I'm talking about for yes and no's. I'm not talking about like you're giving them some complex answer. She, like she wants to know if you have been able to. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. Um, she wants to know how much the plumber is charging in labor per hour, and if on the last bill they charged her by the hour or by the job. Answer. Not even anything like complex like that where you're giving like a multi-part answer or whatever. Just is dinner ready? Yes or no? Something straightforward like that. 50-50 from the other side of the room. And that's other side of the room, and you would have to be facing her, and you would have to be throwing your voice in that direction. Okay, if your back is turned to her, no. No, take the under. If you go to Vegas and that's a bet, take the under. Okay, she's not hearing it. Okay, and so there would always be these moments. Okay, like so that's one type of moment, but there would always be these moments where we could not communicate with her, or we would have to communicate something over and over and over again because she could not see and she could not hear. Okay, and here's the thing: you're not. Look, she didn't choose to lose her vision. She didn't choose to lose her hearing. You know, it's not like she made an active choice that has left her now in this condition. Oh, Ruth, well, she beat her body up all those years doing X kind of behavior, and it's left her in this condition. Blah blah blah. No, these are just normal progressions of things that happened. That she didn't choose it, and we didn't choose it for her. And so you're getting pissed off or you're getting frustrated, and you're really frustrated. I mean, if you're in that moment, and I like I said, I'm sure there were times where I lost my cool, nothing overhanded, but I'm sure there were times where I lost my cool and got frustrated, and took it out on her. But really, what you're frustrated at is just the situation. It's just the condition. So keep that in mind. And that's just one of several different ways that your patience could be tested. And she didn't mean anything by it, when she would ask you something, or when the customer asks you something, right? And you give them an answer and they say, huh, or what, they're not trying to annoy you. Okay, they can't hear you. Okay, they can't understand us, and it's not their fault. Okay, and so, and also I've said this before too in previous videos. Ruth used to always say, "Old people are sensitive." Okay, and I believe that. And Ruth was as delicate as a butterfly. Okay, so she has a natural tendency to be sensitive. But even aside from her, I agree with that sentiment as a generality that old people are sensitive. So you have to keep that in mind, okay? And you have to be measured with your response, and ultimately zooming out from the entire situation. You're always going to be pleased that you just let it slide, and that you just handle the situation. Put down what you're doing. So an example I gave, right? Put down what you're doing, walk over there and say, okay, what's the question? Right? Okay, here's the answer. Okay, what else? Okay, I'm going back to the other side of the room. If you have anything else, wait until I come back. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay? All right. And just even as I do that, it probably comes off like I'm frustrated, but that's better than any kind of yelling or overt emotional response, right? Okay, so we could give a whole bunch of different examples about how your patience gets tested. That's one. If you are being frustrated, if the customer's frustrating you, most likely it's not their fault. Okay, and most likely it's small potato stuff. It's something like this, like having a question asked that while you're trying to do something and it's bad timing and you're not close enough to be able to talk to them and blah blah blah. It's not any kind of like big stakes. There's no big stakes here. Okay, like even I tried. I'll leave you with this. I got to a point where I was like, you know what? When that happens, I'm just gonna ignore it, and just act like I can't hear. Mistake. Okay. All that means is that the customer now thinks that you can't hear, and they just keep asking you and calling your name and asking you and calling your name and asking you. So you're not going to be able to play the game or play your way out of the game. So keep that in mind. All right. Hey, I appreciate you listening to this, tuning in. Again, if you've got any questions, you can email me, Mario at the Alpha Italian. It is in the description for this video. Thank you for your time. I hope that whatever kind of care you're doing, that you are striving to give the customer the best level of care that they can possibly